Good morning, everyone. Life has a way of testing us. There are moments when the weight of responsibilities, challenges, or unexpected events feels too heavy to carry. In those moments, meaning becomes more than just a nice idea. It becomes the anchor that keeps us steady. Today, I want to share 5 key ways we can find meaning when life feels overwhelming. 1. Pause and reconnect with yourself when life gets too loud. Our own inner voice is often drowned out. Taking time to pause through reflection, journaling, meditation, or even a simple walk helps us reconnect with what truly matters to us, meaning often surfaces in silence. 2. Focus on what you can control. Overwhelm comes when we try to hold onto everything at once. By shifting focus to what we can control, our choices, our actions, our attitude, we create a sense of empowerment. Small, intentional steps often reveal deeper purpose. 3. Find strength in connection. Isolation magnifies stress. Reaching out to friends, family, or community not only provides support, but also reminds us that we are part of something larger. Sometimes, meaning is found not in self-reflection, but in shared humanity. 4. Serve something bigger than yourself. Purpose is often born in service. Whether it's helping one person, contributing to a cause, or uplifting others with kindness, serving beyond ourselves brings clarity. It reminds us that our lives matter in ways we may not always see. 5. Reframe challenges as growth opportunities. Life's difficulties are not meaningless, they are invitations to grow. By asking, "What is this teaching me?" instead of "Why me?" we shift from being overwhelmed to being strengthened. Struggles can carve out resilience, wisdom, and compassion. There's something powerful about stopping. In a world that moves at lightning speed, where we're constantly pushed to do more, achieve more, and keep running, it feels almost unnatural to pause. But that pause is often where meaning begins. Think about it. When was the last time you sat quietly, with no phone, no distractions, no agenda, and just listened, not to the world, not to the endless noise around you, but to yourself? Most of us avoid it. Silence can be uncomfortable. Stillness forces us to confront questions we don't always want to answer. Am I on the right path? Am I chasing something that matters? Or am I just running because everyone else is? When life feels overwhelming, it's usually not because we're weak, it's because we've been sprinting without direction. The pause is what helps us remember why we started moving in the first place. I once spoke with someone who told me they felt completely lost, overwhelmed by their work, their family responsibilities, and the pressure to meet everyone's expectations. They described it as drowning. And yet, the turning point for them wasn't in adding more to their life, but in taking something away. They began setting aside just 10 minutes each morning to sit in quiet reflection. 10 minutes, no screens, no emails, no to-do lists. Just them, their thoughts, and a notebook. At first, they admitted it was unbearable, but over time, those 10 minutes became a sanctuary. They began to hear their own voice again, the one that had been buried under noise. And here's the truth. When you reconnect with yourself, clarity begins to surface. You start to see that not everything on your plate actually matters. You realize that some of the things overwhelming you are expectations you never agreed to in the first place. You start to recognize the difference between what's urgent and what's important. That's where meaning lives, in the distinction. So when life feels heavy, the first step isn't to run faster or push harder. It's to pause, to breathe, to give yourself the permission to be still long enough to ask, what truly matters to me right now? The answer won't always come instantly, but if you keep creating space for it, meaning has a way of rising to the surface. One of the biggest reasons life feels overwhelming is because we try to carry the weight of everything, things that belong to us and things that don't. We obsess over the past, worry about the future, and take responsibility for problems far outside our reach. It's like standing in the middle of a storm, stretching our arms as wide as possible, trying to block the wind. No matter how strong we are, we'll never stop the storm that way. The only choice is to focus on the ground beneath our feet and how we can stand firm in the middle of it. The truth is, most of what we worry about lies outside our control. What people think of us, what might happen next month, what's already been done and can't be undone. When we give our energy to those things, we're left exhausted, anxious, and powerless. But when we shift our focus to what we can control, our choices, our actions, our mindset, we begin to feel grounded again. It doesn't make the storm go away, but it makes us stronger within it. I remember a young professional who was completely consumed by the pressure at work. Their company was restructuring, their boss was unpredictable, and every day felt like a gamble. They told me they were paralyzed by fear, constantly running scenarios in their head. What if I lose my job? What if I can't pay the bills? What if I fail? The more they thought about it, the less energy they had to actually perform. And then they asked themselves a simple question: what can I control today? That question changed everything. They realized they couldn't control company decisions, but they could control the effort they put into their work, the relationships they built with colleagues, and how they prepared for uncertainty. By focusing on those things, they regained a sense of agency. The fear didn't disappear overnight, but it no longer defined them. Life becomes less overwhelming when we narrow our attention to the things within our reach. Maybe it's choosing how we speak to someone. Maybe it's deciding to take a walk when our mind feels scattered. Maybe it's showing up with integrity, even when circumstances are unfair. Small, consistent choices build resilience. And in those choices, we rediscover meaning, not in controlling the outcome, but in owning the part of the journey that is truly ours. When life feels overwhelming, our instinct is often to retreat. We pull back, we isolate ourselves, and we convince ourselves that no one could possibly understand what we're going through. But isolation doesn't protect us. It magnifies the weight we're already carrying. The more we keep things inside, the heavier they become. Connection, on the other hand, has the power to lighten the load in ways we can't always explain. Think about the times you've shared a burden with someone you trust. Maybe you didn't even get a solution. Maybe the problem didn't magically disappear. Yet somehow, by simply speaking it out loud and having someone else listen, you felt lighter. That's not an accident. We're wired to find meaning through relationships. We're not meant to carry everything alone. I once met a man who had gone through an incredibly difficult period of his life. He had lost his job, his marriage had ended, and he was living in what felt like a constant fog. His instinct was to hide. He stopped calling friends, stopped attending family gatherings, and told himself he needed to figure it out on his own. But months passed, and nothing improved. What finally shifted things wasn't a sudden breakthrough or a stroke of luck. It was a phone call from an old friend who simply said, "Let's grab coffee." That single conversation didn't solve his problems, but it reminded him he wasn't alone. From there, he slowly started reconnecting with people, and those connections gave him the strength to rebuild. Sometimes, meaning isn't something we create in solitude. It's something that emerges in the space between us and others. A shared laugh, a listening ear, a gentle reminder that someone cares. These small moments are often what help us endure the hardest seasons. They give us perspective. They remind us that even when our own world feels overwhelming, we're part of something bigger. When we open ourselves up to connection, we gain more than support. We gain a mirror. Others reflect back the strength, resilience, and value we often can't see in ourselves. And in that reflection, we begin to rediscover hope. So when life feels too heavy, resist the urge to isolate, reach out, let yourself be seen. Sometimes the meaning we're searching for is waiting for us in the heart of another person. When life feels overwhelming, one of the most powerful ways to regain perspective is to shift the focus away from ourselves. It may sound counterintuitive after all. When we're drowning, the instinct is to think, "How do I save myself?" But the truth is, some of the deepest meaning we'll ever find comes not from asking, "What do I need?" but from asking, "Who can I help?" There's something transformative about serving something bigger than ourselves. It doesn't always have to be grand or world-changing. Sometimes it's as simple as being there for a friend who's struggling, offering encouragement to someone who feels invisible, or contributing to a cause that aligns with our values. These acts remind us that our lives ripple outward. Even in small ways, what we do matters to someone else. I remember hearing a story about a nurse who worked in an emergency ward. The pace was brutal, the emotional toll was overwhelming, and burnout was always around the corner. She admitted that there were days she felt she couldn't take it anymore, but then she described what kept her going. It wasn't the paycheck. It wasn't the recognition. It was the moment when she held a patient's hand and whispered, "You're going to be okay." For her, meaning was found in those small moments of service. The overwhelming chaos of the hospital faded when she remembered she was part of something bigger, giving dignity, comfort, and hope to others. Serving others doesn't erase our problems, but it reframes them. It shifts our perspective from "why is this happening to me?" to "how can I use what I have to make a difference here and now?" And that shift is powerful. Because when we serve, we move beyond survival. We tap into purpose. Life feels less overwhelming when we see ourselves as contributors rather than victims of circumstance. Even if everything else feels out of control, the ability to offer kindness, to lend a hand, or to stand for something greater than ourselves reminds us that our lives are meaningful. And in that service, we often find the strength we didn't know we had. When we're faced with challenges, it's easy to see them as roadblocks, as interruptions to the life we had planned. Our instinct is to ask, "Why me? Why now?" And in that question, overwhelm often takes root. But what if we shifted the question? What if instead of seeing challenges as something unfairly thrown at us, we began asking, "What can this teach me?" That shift doesn't make the pain disappear, but it gives the pain a purpose. Some of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever met are not strong because life was easy for them, but because life was hard, and they chose to grow through it. They turned setbacks into stepping stones. They reframed obstacles as opportunities, and in doing so, they discovered a meaning far deeper than they ever would have if everything had gone smoothly. I once heard the story of a woman who lost her job unexpectedly after 20 years with the same company. At first, she was devastated. Everything she had built her identity around seemed to collapse overnight. She spent weeks asking, "Why me?" But slowly, she began to reframe the situation. She realized she had been unhappy in that job for years, too afraid to leave on her own. Losing it forced her to reevaluate what she wanted. She went back to school, started a new career, and eventually told people that losing her job was the best thing that ever happened to her, though at the time it felt like the worst. Challenges stretch us in ways comfort never can. They strip away what's unnecessary and force us to focus on what's essential. They invite us to build resilience, to develop empathy, to discover strength we didn't know was there. And in the process, we find meaning, not in the suffering itself, but in what the suffering allows us to become. So when life feels overwhelming, when obstacles rise up and you're tempted to ask, "Why me?" pause. Ask instead, "What is this here to teach me? How can this help me grow?" You may not see the answer immediately, but over time, those moments of struggle often become the very chapters that define our strength, our wisdom, and our purpose. When life feels overwhelming, it's not about finding a magic solution that makes everything easier. It's about remembering that meaning is discovered in the small, intentional choices we make every day. When we pause and reconnect with ourselves, when we choose to focus on what we can control, when we lean on others and allow connection to strengthen us, when we serve something larger than ourselves, and when we reframe challenges as opportunities to grow, we transform the weight we carry into a sense of purpose. Overwhelm will always be part of the human experience, but it doesn't have to define us. Meaning isn't waiting at the end of the road. It's created along the way. And if we keep choosing to seek it, even in the darkest seasons, we'll discover that life is not just something to endure, but something deeply worth living.